I'm Jeremy Hinks. Welcome to this video, which is part of a series brought to you by Know You More through one or other of the coaches that make up the Know You More coaching community, in this case, me. To complement the bespoke coaching services it provides, Know You More offers self-paced learning tools for you to consume as you please. They are typically between 5 and 10 minutes long and will encourage helpful self-reflection and, even better, honest and open discussions with colleagues and friends. This one is about being a better manager of your response to stress. So what we're going to be looking at over the next few minutes is some tools to help you to self-manage in stressful situations that you might find helpful for you, but also helpful with colleagues as well. So we're going to be reframing the language about stress in a way that you might find helpful. We're going to be talking about how you will notice how you respond to stress behaviorally, and also what is the trigger for that behavior. And then we'll talk about the possibilities of choice that you have in those stressful situations. First, though, just to look at our defense response. So whenever threatened in sense of life or limb, then a whole sequence of physiological actions occur within our body. At the deepest subconscious level, we don't actually have to think of them. You'll be aware of some of these. So there's all sorts of physical changes that occur to make sure that we basically have the capacity to either run like hell or to defend ourselves to the end. And these include making sure we have increased oxygen uptake, that we release sugars so that the energy necessary for our muscles to do whatever we're going to do, right, fight or flight, can actually achieve that action. And we do all sorts of things like decrease the rate of our breathing, and we increase heart rate. There's all sorts of blood rate chemistry that goes on as well. The body also closes down the things that are really not very important when it comes to immediate self-protection. So digestion, the various productivities of metabolism are shut down, and our inflammation response is reduced as well. In amongst this extraordinary cascade of chemistry that is going on, we also have behavioral, emotional, and cognitive impacts as well. And in terms of emotion, we tend to lose our ability to interact effectively with other people. Again, that might seem extraneous when you are under threat. We also become much more black and white in our approach, if you like, are more prone to high energy, angry responses, and definitely with a win-lose mentality. The cognitive impact is very significant as well, in that the needs for us to process complex data just disappear. It's very simple. We are in a fight for survival. So the processing power of our brain is very much reduced, and our ability to act on complex data is effectively wiped clean. We don't need that process. So it is known and fully understood that in the situations of high physical threat, we become actually super efficient at running away or fighting, but we are unable to actually process anything more complex than those two outcomes. What then of social threat? So this might seem a little bit different from the scale to threat to life and limb, but in actual fact, it's not in terms of our physiological response. So a social threat could be something that manifests itself in just a conversation. It could be in a scheduled conversation, if you like, with a colleague in a one-to-one meeting. It might be bumping somebody in the street. It might literally be the fact that they are physically in your space. It might be something you see that personally affronts you. It could be giving a presentation yourself, all sorts of things. Or it can be a function of your environment. But if any one of these things has an abrasive effect on you, if you like, then a whole load of body chemistry goes on again, very much the same as physical threat. Maybe not to quite the same level, but to all intents and purposes, the same physical manifestations occur. Crucially, we have the same emotional response. We become less empathetic, rather more win-lose mentality, maybe prone to high energy reactions, being angry, for example. But also, we lose our cognitive capabilities as well. We lose that sense of being able to process complex emotions, both our own and other people's, and become less functional in that what is much more of a sociable environment here. This is just somebody who might have offended us by saying the wrong word or using the wrong tone. And all of this you might interpret, we might sense as being stress, or certainly stressful. Just changing tack a little bit to present the stress in a slightly different way. If you think of this graph where you have performance on the y-axis from low to high, going up the page, up the screen, I beg your pardon, and you've got your brain activity, your cognitive activity going on from low to high, going across from left to right on your screen. And if you imagine a typical person who is having very low levels of brain activity, you would, I think, accept that there's not likely to be very high levels of performance coming from that person. Then if you increase that level of brain activity, you'll get to a point where there's increasingly high levels of performance until you get to a maximum. And then that performance will tail off as the brain activity becomes chaotic, put it that way. Bang smack in the middle of that performance versus brain activity graph, you have the high point of performance versus brain activity, which has many names that you will have probably heard it called, and maybe it calls itself being in the zone, when you feel like things are going perfectly for you, you're being extremely efficient, you're enjoying what you're doing, you're being productive, and everything's meaningful for you as well. Another word used commonly is to be in flow. More psychologist type language would be that if you are in this place, you are in an approach mentality, and you are definitely functioning in what is called competency mode. Conversely, at the low and high brain activity parts of the graph where performance is at its minimum, these are both areas that would be classified as stressed. At the low end, that's actually called eustress, EU stress, and at the high end, the more commonly used word distress. But other language that I'll be using from now on is that it's people in stress positions that tend to have an avoid response, or they step away from the situation, and they are operating in survival mode. The one thing I should have said earlier, of course, is that our capability of operating in survival mode is crucial to our well-being, and we wouldn't be on this planet in the position that we are in without that capability. The issue is that it's intended only to be a very transient physical state, because as soon as we come out of that threatening situation, we should return to competency mode. So the thing about social threat is that it actually is all over the place. It could be in meetings, it could be at work, it could be at home, it could be meeting new people, new social environments, it could be having a difficult conversation, it could be giving a presentation like this. I must admit a sense of slight social threat, and I'm wondering whether this is proving to be an effective presentation. So the issue is that social threat is potentially a very common occurrence if we respond to it. So a social threat is one that could be felt time and time again every day, perhaps, and you could find yourself in that physiological situation where all that body chemistry is going on, the emotional and cognitive changes are occurring over a considerably long period of time, which our bodies are not designed for. And that is when we can both have the physical and mental consequences of being stressed or in an anxious state. So what are the simple things you might be able to do about this? Well, although some of these things might sound obvious, they're actually quite tricky to do. You have to develop the habit of this. And one of those things is noticing. So when you're in a stressful situation, what is it that you are feeling going on inside your body? What are those sensations? Being very clear and consciously being aware of those feelings and where they are, what they feel like, giving them as much granularity in the way you describe them as possible can be really helpful in recognizing them as they come into play at future times. You might also think about what people would see you doing when you're stressed. What are your movements? What are your tics? What are your habits? You find yourself hiding behind your hand when you're talking, for example. So notice what those physical habits, those things that people would see you do, can be very helpful as well, and making a note of those. And also, what are you telling yourself in your own mind when you're stressed? Do you have a voice in your mind that is actually guiding you to take a particular course of action that you maybe follow in an unquestioning way? So what is that voice? What is that voice saying? How is it saying it? Having done that noticing, then what is it that has happened to cause you to behave in this way? What is the trigger that has caused you to have that voice, to have those physical manifestations that other people will see, and have those feelings within your own body that might be only known to yourself. So noticing that trigger is very, very important in helping you to manage your stress response. And there's a very lovely phrase that I will share with you prior to moving on to the last part of this talk. And that is, it's a quote from Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor and also a psychologist. His psychology was based around his own very challenging personal experiences during the war. But he says that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And he's basically saying that when we are triggered and moving towards a stressful situation, there is what might seem like an infinitesimally small piece of time, space in time, that we can stop and choose the behavior that we manifest as a result of that trigger, rather than just letting our typical behaviors come into play, which might not be serving our purpose at all. So a phrase that I like, which is used in various therapies to help people stop smoking and drug taking as well. It's called surfing the urge, and it relates to Victor's statement that I just shared with you. It's basically saying that if in that moment after the trigger has been sensed, we can surf the urge that we would normally follow of going to our negative behaviors, and while surfing, which we can do only if we notice we've been triggered, which we can only do if we notice the responses to that trigger, then in that moment we can choose to do something more productive rather than reacting in a way that's not serving our purpose. So the question is, can you notice your trigger, and then can you surf the urge, and can you choose to follow a different response? So in this very brief discussion, we've looked at a range of things, touched a lot of bases, been looking at how to recognize stress, maybe think of it more in terms of the distinction between survival mode, a very positive thing for us, but not a mode we want to be in for long, and competency mode, that mode where we have the maximum performance for the brain activity, our brain activity. The other two words I would encourage you to use is, if you are feeling stressed, you might be somebody you have an avoid response. You should try to find ways to avoid an avoid response and move to an approach response, where you step towards the challenge that you are facing. A very helpful thing for you to do, which you can do using one of our worksheets, is to notice your responses to stress, the 3 responses I described earlier, and also the trigger that caused those behavioral responses. But also think about 2 things, actually, the good things those triggers might be telling you about yourself, because the trigger is likely to be associated with a strength that you have that might be a very positive strength in many different walks of your life, that is just being railroaded in these stressful situations. The other thing is to think how all of your thinking about noticing your trigger, noticing your behaviors, how that learning can help you in other parts of your life. It might be really valuable in a completely different situation. Having done all that noticing, it's all about that choice. It's a very simple word. To choose. It's maybe not quite so easy to do, and to notice your stress response, to understand your triggers, recognize your behaviors, and choose a different behavior. That is a muscle you will need to exercise and to create a new habit that you'll follow, but a more positive one, a more purposeful one. So as I briefly mentioned there is a worksheet to help you capture these stress responses and your learning from them, that you'll find very useful. It will help just to keep things at the front of your mind with regard to your response to stress. And that's it for us today. So thank you very much for listening. I hope that this will be a prompt for you to think about your thinking in a productive way. If you'd like to know more about the coaching community at Know You More, then please do go to the website that you see noted here. I'm delighted to be part of the Know You More community of independent coaches, and you can find out more about my practice in Alpha Male coaching using the relevant link above too. For now, though, it's goodbye until we meet again.